Picture this. You're standing in a massive, sweltering room.
Sounds intense already.
Oh, it is. The air around you is literally vibrating. You've got these flashing, completely disorienting lights just cutting through this thick haze.
Right.
And your rib cage is like rattling from this really heavy, relentless mechanical beat. And this beat, it hasn't changed its tempo in what feels like 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. You have completely lost your sense of time. So if you had to guess, you'd probably say you were in a clandestine warehouse rave in Berlin, right? Or maybe a massive techno club in Detroit.
I mean, yeah, that would be the logical assumption. That is, the exact sensory profile of modern immersive club culture.
Exactly.
You go to a place like that specifically to lose yourself in the physical environment of the sound.
But here's the twist. It isn't Berlin, and it isn't 2026.
Okay.
The year is 1969. And you are in a dingy underground hall in London. There are no laptops, there are 0 digital drum machines, and, no modern synthesizers.
Right, none of that technology existed yet.
Exactly. The people generating this mind-altering, relentless loop are just a scruffy rock band holding electric guitars.
Which is just a complete subversion of everything we expect from that era. I mean, we have a very established cultural narrative about the late 1960s.
We really do. We expect Woodstock, right?
Yeah, exactly. We expect blues-based guitar solos, typical tie-dye psychedelia, and, bands writing traditional songs, a verse, a chorus, and a neat little ending to entertain a crowd.
And that expectation is exactly why we are so thrilled to welcome you to this deep dive today. We've got this truly fascinating piece of source material in front of us. It's an April 2026 music column from MMR, and it's titled The Repetition Machine That Rang in Space.
It's a great piece.
It really is. And our mission for today's deep dive is to explore how this one underground London rock band, Hawkwind, just completely abandoned the rules of music.
They really threw the rule book out the window.
They did. They weren't trying to entertain a crowd at all. They were actively trying to engineer an acoustic apparatus that was meant to literally alter human consciousness.
Okay, let's unpack this because when most of us think of 1969 rock, we absolutely do not think of a band trying to invent a psychological repetition machine.
No, we really don't. And I think that is what makes this column so vital for anyone who's, interested in how audio affects the human brain.
Yeah.
It reveals how Hawkwind actually serves as the secret, almost chaotic blueprint for modern electronic music and techno.
It's wild to think about.
It is. The core takeaway you should pull from this deep dive isn't just like a piece of vintage rock trivia. It is a really deep mechanical analysis of how sound can be deliberately designed to expand our perception of reality.
So to understand how you even begin to build a machine like that, especially out of guitars and drum kits, we have to look at the architect of all this, Dave Brock.
Right, the founder. Yeah. And the source points out something that feels incredibly contradictory at first. Brock actually started his career playing blues and acoustic folk music.
Which, if you think about it, is inherently a very structured, narrative-driven form of music.
Right.
Like, think about a traditional folk song.
Yeah.
It's a linear story. The chords change to guide you through the emotional beats of the tale, and then the melody resolves cleanly at the end.
Yeah, it has a very clear beginning, middle, and destination.
Exactly.
But then he aggressively pivots away from that. He just leaves the folk clubs totally behind and dives headfirst into drones, primitive electronics, and just relentless repetition.
A total 180.
Completely. And the column makes a point to clarify something really important for you here. Hawkwind is historically labeled as space rock.
Yeah.
But that wasn't a metaphor.
No, not at all.
It wasn't just a fun sci-fi theme with, lyrics about aliens and lasers. They were attempting the literal creation of a cosmic perception. They wanted to use these sustained beats and wailing, siren-like synths to completely detach the listener from normal, everyday time.
What's fascinating here is the sheer psychological intent behind that pivot. I mean, Brock realized that if your goal is to actually alter consciousness, traditional song structures are a barrier.
How so?
Well, when you listen to a blues progression, your brain is actively engaged in predicting the next chord change. You're anchored to the forward momentum of the song.
Oh, I see. You're waiting for the next part.
Exactly. So to break that anchor, Brock started utilizing drones. And drones are just single, continuous, sustained notes that never resolve.
Just one long note.
Yeah. And he paired those with early, really crude audio generators. that would just emit these oscillating unearthly frequencies over the music.
Okay, let me see if I have the mechanics of this right, just to make sure the listener, can really visualize this.
Sure.
So if a traditional blues song is like walking down a path toward a specific destination, you know where you started and you know where you are going.
Mm.
Brock's new approach was like stepping onto a massive moving treadmill that never stops. You aren't walking toward a destination anymore. You are just existing in perpetual motion.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. A linear song demands your attention on the future.
Yeah.
Like, where's the melody going next?
Yeah.
The treadmill analogy works perfectly because a treadmill is a sustained state of being. When you remove the destination from the music, the listener's brain stops anticipating the next chord.
It just gives up.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
The brain is forced to surrender to the present moment.
Hmm.
And that surrender is the exact mechanism that detaches you from the everyday sensation of time passing.
But conceptually, that creates a massive logistical problem.
It does.
Because if your goal is to completely detach the listener from the concept of time, how do you actually construct that within the physical confines of a commercial piece of vinyl?
Right. The medium itself is an issue.
Yeah, a studio album in the early 1970s is inherently limited. It has a physical side A and side B, and each side maxes out at around, 22 minutes.
About that, yeah.
And it is literally sliced into distinct tracks with those little 3-second gaps of silence in between. So how do you build an endless treadmill on a medium that's designed for short, digestible sprints?
It's a fundamental engineering problem. And the source actually tracks this evolution chronologically to show exactly how they bypass those limitations.
Okay.
The first major turning point is their album, In Search of Space. They realized that the gaps of silence between songs were the enemy of the trance state.
Because silence breaks the spell.
Exactly. Silence resets the brain. So they started using heavy electronic washes, tape echo, and these sustained synthesizer tones to bleed the tracks together.
So they effectively erased the borders between the songs.
Precisely. They expanded their use of narrative interludes and continuous noise so the entire album felt like one unbroken 22-minute audio journey per side.
Wow.
But then they took it a step further with their next record, Do Re Mi Fa Sol La Ti Do. This is where they really tightened those repetitive structures into driving, relentless rhythms. They weren't just blurring the edges of the songs anymore. They were standardizing the pulse beneath them.
And that leads us to what the column calls their purest essence, which was the live album Space Ritual.
Oh, absolutely.
This is where they managed to fix a live experience of endless noise, poetry readings, and driving bass into a permanent medium.
It's a masterpiece.
I really want to highlight a specific track the source mentions from this era, Master of the Universe. They took this incredibly heavy, driving riff, and instead of playing it a few times and moving to a chorus, they just stretched it out to its absolute breaking point.
And when we talk about a heavy riff in this context, we really need to be clear about the mechanics.
Yeah, paint a picture for us.
We are talking about heavily down-tuned guitars smothered in fuzz pedals, creating this thick, low-frequency sludge.
Sludge is the perfect word.
It really is.
Yeah.
The source notes that this specific technique, stretching a slow, thick, hypnotic riff far beyond its normal lifespan, is what birthed entire future subgenres of heavy music, specifically stoner rock and doom metal.
Because those genres are entirely built on the idea that the riff is a physical weight, right? Like, it isn't just notes, it's actual mass.
Exactly.
And the column emphasizes that these works lacked traditional beginnings and endings. So for you listening, think of it this way. These aren't songs you put on a casual playlist while doing the dishes.
No, definitely not.
They are, quote, spaces to stay in. It's less like putting on a track and more like opening a door, walking into a dark room, and just living inside the architecture of the sound for a while.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this concept is revolutionary. Treating an album as a continuous environmental continuum, like a room to inhabit, rather than a collection of distinct radio-friendly singles.
Yeah.
That is exactly what laid the groundwork for modern ambient music. They were pioneering the idea that music can be a holistic, immersive environment.
But building these rooms of sound required them to rely heavily on a specific musical tool. And honestly, on paper, this tool sounds like a terrible idea.
It really does.
We are talking about relentless, unchanging repetition.
Completely unapologetic repetition.
Yeah, and the source draws a direct parallel here between Hawkwind's sustained beats and the rhythms coming out of Germany at the exact same time.
Right, the krautrock scene.
Exactly. The post-World War II German music scene was trying to completely rebuild rock music from scratch, giving rise to krautrock. Bands like New and Can were pioneering something called the motoric rhythm.
And motoric loosely translates to motor skill or motor-like.
Okay.
Imagine a straight 4/4 driving beat on the drums. There are no cymbals crashing to announce a big chorus, and there are absolutely no flashy drum fills showing off the drummer's technical skill.
Just a straight line.
Exactly. It is just a relentless driving pulse, like a machine hurtling down the Autobahn.
The source notes that both the German krautrock bands and Hawkwind shared this underlying contemporary philosophy, consciousness transformation through repetition.
Right.
The formula was shockingly simple. You hold a basic riff, you lock into a motoric beat, you hold it for 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you layer it with noise and electronics.
That's the recipe.
But here's where it gets really interesting, because I have to push back on this for you, the listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
If I am sitting in a room and a rock band plays the exact same basic guitar chord with the exact same drum beat with zero variation for 15 minutes straight, how does that not just induce mind-numbing boredom?
It's a fair question.
I mean, if there's a total lack of musical progression, why wouldn't the audience just check their watches and go to the bar?
It is a brilliant question,
Yeah.
and it highlights the ultimate paradox of this kind of music. It is essential to understand this if you want to grasp how modern electronic music works on human neurology.
Okay, explain it to us.
The boredom you are talking about comes from a brain that expects to be passively entertained.
Meaning a brain that is waiting for the band to do a cool trick or hit a high note.
Exactly. When music is constantly changing, new lyrics, a sudden guitar solo, a dynamic shift in tempo, your brain is engaging in predictive processing.
It's working to figure out what's next.
Right. It is being fed new information constantly, and it uses analytical energy to consume and organize that data. But when the music intentionally stops changing, when it becomes a sustained field of static repetition, your brain initially searches for a pattern. It expects the drop.
And when the drop never comes.
Once the brain realizes the pattern isn't going to change, it stops anticipating. It literally stops waiting for the next beat because it already knows exactly what the next beat sounds like.
Oh, wow.
The music stops being a forward-moving narrative and becomes a static physical presence. The repetition is deliberate acoustic engineering designed to induce a trance state.
That's amazing.
Yeah, your mind, effectively starved of new analytical information to process, has no choice but to turn inward. It begins to expand into the empty space the repetition creates. This psychological mechanism is the foundational architecture of all minimal music and modern techno.
That is genuinely incredible. They are purposefully starving the analytical, predictive part of the brain to force the subconscious introspective part to wake up.
Exactly.
They use repetition to turn the music into a blank canvas.
The repetition is the key that unlocks the door to the trance. The less the music does, the more your mind is forced to do.
Okay, I understand the neurological mechanism now, but Hawkwind's trance state wasn't meant to be just a quiet, internal mental exercise.
Oh, definitely not.
No, they weren't asking you to sit cross-legged in a silent, incense-filled room. They wanted to make this trance a total body, intensely physical ordeal. Which brings us to their legendary live shows, the extreme use of volume, and the arrival of a very famous bass player.
The physical dimension cannot be overstated here. The source highlights that their live shows were designed as comprehensive, overwhelming art installations.
Yeah, total sensory overload.
Exactly. They integrated blinding, strobing lighting, avant-garde dancers, and they brought in the acclaimed sci-fi writer Michael Moorcock to perform these booming, dystopian poetry readings over the noise.
Just wow.
They didn't want you to just watch a show. They wanted to swallow you whole.
They turned the stage into a literal narrative environment. And to ensure you couldn't ignore it, they weaponized their amplifier.
Weaponized is the right word.
They used extreme, almost punishing volume to act physically on the listener's body. The bass wasn't just in your ears, it was moving the air in the room, it was rattling your internal organs.
And then in the early 1970s, the physical weight and density of the band shifts dramatically.
Yeah.
Enter Ian Lemmy Kilmister.
Yes. Lemmy, who would later go on to form the legendary heavy metal band Motorhead, joins Hawkwind, and his specific approach to the bass guitar fundamentally alters their sonic profile.
Because Lemmy wasn't a traditional bass player. He was originally a rhythm guitarist who essentially got handed a bass.
Right.
So he didn't play it like a rhythm section instrument. He played it like a rhythm guitar. He was strumming full chords on his Rickenbacker bass using a guitar pick and driving a signal through heavily distorted amplifiers.
The source mentions the track Silver Machine from this era. It actually became a massive hit, and it had a surprisingly pop-structured feel, but it kept that core, driving repetition intact underneath.
It is.
Adding Lemmy's bass style to a space rock band, I mean, it was like pulling out the gentle thrusters of a delicate spaceship and violently welding a massive iron V8 engine to the hull.
What a visual.
Right. Suddenly, the music wasn't just floating in the ethereal cosmos. It had aggressive speed, grit, and immense gravity.
This raises an important question, though. How does heavy, fast, aggressive, distorted rock maintain the delicate trance state we were just dissecting?
Yeah, that seems like a contradiction.
It does. You would logically think that the sheer aggression of strummed, distorted bass chords would shatter the hypnotic loop.
Right. Because you just explained that the trance comes from a sustained static field, not from getting repeatedly punched in the chest by a wall of distortion. How do those two things coexist?
Well, the source explains that the heavy distortion and the increased speed didn't break the repetition at all. They simply mutated it.
Mutated it how?
They made the trance intensely, violently physical. Instead of a purely mental expansion where you drift off into your own thoughts, the trance became an endurance test for the body.
Wow.
The repetition was still the core engine, but now it was driven by this massive, grinding low end. This is exactly what built a direct bridge to the future of heavy metal and industrial music.
That makes perfect sense.
They proved that a trance doesn't have to be a gentle, ambient meditation. It could be heavy, fast, and completely overwhelming.
They took the concept of a meditative chant and gave it the physical mass of a freight train.
Precisely. They proved that volume and distortion, when repeated endlessly, become their own form of silence.
Which perfectly sets up the final major theme of the column and really the ultimate legacy of what this band achieved. This physical, repetitive trance didn't just stay confined to the world of 1970s heavy rock.
No, it didn't.
It leaked out. It became the core DNA for entire electronic movements decades later. We are talking about the architecture of techno before the technology of techno even existed.
The historical line the deep dive draws here is fascinating. The source extracts this thesis that Hawkwind is the literal organic prototype for modern electronic dance music.
It's crazy to think about.
Their use of steady motoric tempos, relentless repetition, and complex sonic layers bleeding into each other, these are the exact foundational pillars of Detroit and Berlin techno.
Yeah.
Techno relies on drum machines, like the Roland TR-909, to create an unwavering kick drum that loops infinitely in a warehouse space. Hawkwind was doing that manually.
And the column makes a really brilliant aesthetic comparison here. It contrasts Hawkwind with Kraftwerk.
Well, that's a great comparison.
Now, for you listening, Kraftwerk is widely considered the undisputed godfather of electronic music. They were German, they were using early synthesizers, and they were entirely focused on repetition.
True.
But Kraftwerk was starkly mechanical. They were precise, clean, and quantized, almost like scientists working in a sterile lab. Hawkwind, on the other hand, was organic, sweaty, hairy, and completely chaotic.
Yet, despite those massive aesthetic differences, the source points out that both bands were united by a future-oriented approach to repetition.
They were looking forward.
Exactly. They were both using endless loops and sustained beats to look forward into a mechanized future, rather than looking backward at the blues tradition. And Hawkwind's specific concept of sound existing as a physical environment, that architectural room we talked about earlier, is what heavily influenced the entire genre of ambient music that followed in the 1980s.
So what does it all mean?
It means they laid the groundwork for everything.
Yeah, like if you go to a club today, if you are a raver standing in a dark room with flashing strobes, letting a repetitive, heavy, synthesized beat rattle your bones for 6 hours straight, are you essentially just unknowingly participating in a 50-year-old Hawkwind experiment?
According to the analysis in this column, absolutely.
That's wild.
Hawkwind successfully shifted the entire paradigm of music from something you listen to into an apparatus you enter. They were practicing the fundamental philosophy of techno long before the digital samplers and sequencers required to easily make techno even existed.
They were way ahead of their time.
They built the blueprint for the modern rave using electric guitars, crude oscillators, and sheer punishing volume.
They built a techno club using rock and roll instruments. The consciousness-altering structure was completely figured out in 1969. the digital tools just caught up to the philosophy decades later?
The intention preceded the technology.
This has been such a wild journey to unpack. So, to bring it all back to you, the listener, the core takeaway from this column is incredibly relevant to how we live today.
It really is.
Hawkwind proves that sometimes deliberately reducing the amount of information you are processing through hypnotic driving repetition actually creates far more mental space than constantly throwing new data at the brain.
It is the ultimate power of subtraction.
Hmm.
When you remove the narrative, you find the space beneath it.
And for anyone listening who loves to learn, who is constantly reading, constantly scrolling, constantly absorbing new data, but maybe hates that modern feeling of extreme information overload, there is profound value in this concept.
Absolutely.
There is a real psychological benefit to finding focus through rhythmic routines or by stepping into sustained ambient soundscapes while you work. Sometimes, to clear the noise out of your head, you have to step onto the acoustic treadmill and let the repetition do the heavy lifting.
And if we look to the horizon, this analysis leaves us with a truly compelling thought to consider.
Ooh, leave us with something to think about.
If a chaotic underground rock band in 1969 could design an acoustic apparatus powerful enough to literally alter human perception of time and space,
Yeah.
using just analog guitars, crude amplifiers, and tape delay.
Yeah.
What happens when tomorrow's immersive technologies and AI systems start deliberately designing personalized, algorithmically perfected soundscapes to hack our consciousness?
Wow.
If Hawkwind was the rough, organic prototype, are we truly ready to step into the ultimate, mathematically perfected repetition machine?
That is a fascinating and slightly terrifying thought that will definitely stay with me. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.